Okay, thank you, Ine. Good morning, everybody. So there are still some people here with us. It's okay. Okay, so I'm coming from Joint Research Center, and this work was done together with my colleagues, mainly with Jiří Hradec, who is unfortunately not with us today. So basically, I will present this work on behalf of him. He is really the main author, the main master of this presentation. You all know what is Inspire Geoportal, why do we have it, so I will not repeat it. Maybe only that you all know we launched the new, let's say, front end of the Inspire Geoportal, which is now, I hope, more user-friendly, and I hope it will be used much more in the future. Okay, so what was our idea? Idea was basically to play a little bit with Inspire access logs to see, okay, who is really using Inspire Geoportal, are there users at all, where they are coming from, what purposes, and so on and so on. So to do some kind of analysis from the user needs perspective. We took log files basically for 4 months, so from March to June 2018. Why this period? You all know that May is usually reporting period, so 15th of May. So we thought, okay, let's see, maybe there's some usage increase in usage around May. But anyway, it's 411 probably, I would say. So we will see, is it true or not? And yeah, basically Jiří did some programming in Python to analyze those logs, and visualization was done using this Seaborn library. Okay, so let's start. So this is an overall, let's say, analysis where what we can see here, we can see basically the countries and access to Inspire Geoportal. So the color of dots doesn't mean anything, so you just look at the dots and the size basically of the dots corresponding to the number of hits or searches. You cannot see much here, so I will zoom it a little bit. So if we look where are the, let's say, users of Inspire Geoportals coming, mostly, so we can see obviously it's Spain. Then we have Germany, so constantly there are some searches, Netherlands as well, Italy, and it's Poland. So it's interesting to analyze this to see where the most searches on the Inspire Geoportal is coming. Here, what we can see here, we try to connect, of course, Inspire data teams with the countries. So basically, who is searching for what data teams? So it's a kind of a heat map. And again, we can see Germany basically on the top. And the most searches are going for, let's say, land use data team, addresses, administrative units, transport networks. So these are the teams which are, it seems, of the most interest for the users. On the next one, we can see by the resource type. It's interesting to see that we, in general, we identified all the requests which are coming from the EU domain, so like European Union. So obviously the people in the Commission are also using heavily Inspire Geoportal for searching the data. What is the most, let's say, searched for are basically layers. So they want to view the data if the layers are available, and together, of course, data sets or series and downloadable data set. So it's another heat map on the Geoportal.
The scale is the number of hits.
Yes. So the scale is here with the number of hits. Another one is showing a topic categories. Again, we have countries, Germany on the top most, and then we see that they are searching planning cadastre, transportation, boundaries, and environment. So these are the most topic categories that are searched through Inspire Geoportal, which corresponds basically with the heat map on the data teams. I like very much this one. So what we would like to show here is basically when country is searching for what data they are searching, so where. So if you look at the Germany, the most they are searching for the data from the Germany. So it's nice to see, basically it's obvious correlation that usually when the country is searching for the data inside the country. Nice to see again that European Union domain, so Commission probably, and institutions of the European Union, they are searching for all countries around the whole Europe. But very interesting to show. Okay, then we step to see what are the data themes most searched. Again, many of them. I will maybe zoom it a little bit. So the most searched was land use during the time. Then also transport networks, cadastral parcels, administrative units, addresses, and so on and so on. It's also nice analysis to see, so in what specific inspired data themes users are mostly interested in. Then we try to see for specific data themes what is going on, and here what we can see, it's a land use data theme. Again, we can see some patterns, I would say. So it's obvious that, for example, I don't know, if we look at here, let's say Czech Republic, so they were searching for some period of the time. So it's maybe hard to say exactly why it's like this, but obviously someone is working maybe on some project, needs land use data, and obviously in one period of time is searching for those type of data. So we can see also for the other countries. Here, okay, we can say maybe from other countries it's accidentally that in specific day someone was searching for a specific data theme. But these patterns, I would say, it's really, for at least from our perspective, shows that someone is really working on the specific data theme or with those type of data, and it's interested to search for those data. Then this is for textual queries. Again, where the most coming from. Again, we have the Germany on the top with lots of them. Italy, Poland, Spain again, and so on and so on. But again, nice to see where the most textual, so it's a free text search.
Sorry, what's the time scale?
A time scale is, as I said, from the beginning, it's 4 months. So from March till June this year. So we pick it by purpose because we wanted to see is there any correlation with the reporting period. So it's 4 months, 4 months period. Okay, so basically I'm coming to the end. What we wanted to see, first of all, are the users. So I think the answer is clearly yes. There are many users. It's also nice to see that the users are not only coming from Europe. There are many users, especially from United States, from different states, but also from Australia and so on and so on. So really around the world. So it's interesting to see that many people are interested in European data coming from Inspire Geoportal. We found interesting relations between spatial and thematic interest. So obviously, for those period, at least for this period of time, mainly the users were searching for Annex 1 data themes, so transport networks, obviously, and addresses, administrative units, cadastral parcels. Seems they are really interested. We didn't find no pattern related to reporting obligations, what we expected. We thought, in May, probably, or around the 15th of May, there will be increasing of usage, but not really, surprisingly. Then, of course, we will continue monitoring. We expect that with the launch of this new front end of the Inspire Geoportal that the usage will increase. So let's see. So I hope that next year we can show maybe some comparison between those, what we did this year and the future users and usage of Inspire Geoportal. Thank you very much.
amongst the users, there may be, for instance, Patineo making a test for quality of service. Are you able to make distinction between this kind of users and normal users?
Well, we didn't go so deep, but I think we can probably find this from the log files. We can find those type of information, but we didn't do this in this work. Thanks.
I'm Laura, like Ina told you, and I'm the product owner of Geopunt, the Flemish Geoportal. I work for Informatie Vlaanderen, which is a public administration within Flanders, one of the 3 regions of Belgium. And you can see here on that slide some numbers that indicated our agency. First, a quick overview of what Geopunt stands for. Geopunt is the geoportal of Flanders, and it was launched in November 2013, and it meets the SDI Flanders degree and the Inspire Directive. You see here some components, key components on your left. I won't go any deeper on it, I don't have time for that. But I would like you to see the number on the right. We are proud to have an average of 6,000 active users per day. But let's start telling our story. I would like you to tell you the story about us finding out who our users are. Begin 2017, my management came to me and asked me, who are your users? Why do they use Geopunt? Do they use it for their job or for personal purposes? We didn't have a clue. Of course, we had some ideas. We meet our customers a lot during workshops, info sessions, and on conferences. And we have a very good help desk that captures questions, suggestions, complaints. But we still missed a huge part of the users that are frequently on Geopunt and doesn't need a workshop anymore, or those who doesn't complain and are happy, or doesn't dare to complain. So we wanted to hear those kind of users. We decided to listen. Therefore, we used 3 approaches. The first one was an online survey we launched on our Geopunt map website during 1 month, and we had 522 respondents. The second one was a questionnaire on our annual conference. It was a month later than from our online survey, and 43 respondents were willing to participate that questionnaire. And then we tried a more advanced approach. We worked together with a company that specialized in user testing, and together with our knowledge of Geopunt and their knowledge of getting to know what a user wants, we worked out 3 phases of detailed user testing. That during 6 months, 32 people were heard. 3 different approaches, which each of their own contribution for our search and users' insights. Let's take a quick look at each of them. The first one was our online survey. It was a link on the Geopunt map during 1 month. So, of course, the respondents were people who visited most frequently our Geopunt. Therefore, I could say the type of users were our common users. They could choose to leave their email or to keep anonymous. What kind of questions did we ask? We wanted to know about a user, their age, their job, what kind of profession that they do, but also their behavior. What kind of tools do they like the most, or use the most? Are they satisfied? Have they IDs? Do they want it on mobile, etc.? That online survey and the results, the evaluation of it, was made by the Geopunt team. Let's take a look at the results very quickly. We learned that 76% uses Geopunt from those respondents for professional purposes. And from those professional users, we saw that there was at least 87% that uses it weekly, and that we were surprised. We knew that Geopunt was... Do you hear me through the mic? It's okay. It must be my ears then. We were surprised. We knew that the the visitors for Geopunt who uses Geopunt for professional purposes use it frequently, but that it was that frequently, we were really surprised, and that's really nice to know. Another question we asked is how did they find out about Geopunt? We have some numbers from Google Analytics. You will see that on my second presentation later on. But that's not that detailed about how did they heard about it. We know from if they are directly to Geopunt or referred or by a search. But how did they really first knew about Geopunt? Another thing we asked, because we had a lot of complaints, it's subjective, but we had a lot of complaints about Geopunt not working on the mobile devices. So we asked, do you really need Geopunt working mobile friendly? We were surprised to see that in this survey, less than a half said we need it on a mobile friendly Geopunt. Some other statistics, 77% finds easily information, they say, and 90% would recommend Geopunt to others. The other approach was a month later. It was on a conference, our annual conference, and we held a questionnaire. So people, we knew them, they were not anonymous, and we tried to find two types of users, those who doesn't really frequently use Geopunt and those who does. What kind of questions did we ask? We rather asked the same questions as in the online survey, but we used a different, an extra methodology. We had written some scenarios where the people had to go through on Geopunt, and there was somebody of our team observing their actions. So we really saw what would they do if they want to get a layer shown or not. Is it like we thought they would or not? And that was really useful information for us. Again, this kind of approach, this questionnaire, was made and evaluated by our own team. Here's some results. Here there were 93% of the respondents that said that they use it for professional needs. Of course, that's logic. The conference was a professional conference. We tried a different approach, as I said, and it was really useful. We also asked, where do you know Geopunt from? Here we got different responses than from the online survey. But the thing I really was surprised of was that the question about a mobile-friendly Geopunt, here those respondents said, 93% of them said, yes, we need them. And then I realized with my team that we really needed different approaches, that we don't have to put only one survey and just believe that that's the Bible and that says everything. So we decided to go to work together with a specialized company in user testing. We again used scenarios, but they also had eye tracking, which we saw then what the respondent, where their eyes were on the screen going through the scenario. And that was really also useful information about the behavior of the visitor for Geopunt. There was 4 types of users we selected. It was from a user that never heard about Geopunt to a user that frequently uses it. I can't show you the results of it. It would be to take too much time. But what I would like to show you about those user testing with that specialized company is the phases we went through. First of all, we went to the respondent with a scenario on the as-is situation of Geopunt. So we made an evaluation about the as-is situation. With the results of that were some improvements we had to make, some changes, and all those improvements and changes we identified it, and we created mock-ups to create a to-be situation of Geopunt. With that to-be situation, the mock-ups, we again went to the types of users, the different types of users, and we asked it again to evaluate it, to go through the scenario, and again with the eye tracking and the observing of somebody from that specialized company who really dig deeper with questions to the respondent. We had some more results and some more information. We again modified those mock-ups, and we made a final test doing a 2B2 evaluation. And the results was a report with final recommendations and advices which we can use now to look how and when and if we will make Geopunt better with the improvements set by the users. My conclusions for those 3 approaches and those user testing I've been doing now a year are a set of advice to you. First of all is use different approaches. I think now you heard it through my presentations. First of all, I didn't know that, but because of the different kind of results from those first 2 kind of approaches, I realized it's really necessary to use different approaches. It's more powerful, you get more kind of results, the whole set of it. Secondly, I advise you to take your time. Take your time to create that online survey. Don't rush it. Also take your time covering the survey, the questionnaire, the user testing, and last but not least, also take your time to evaluate it. Third of it, work with specialists. We know our Geoportal the best. We made it. We work with it. But also work with the specialists of the users. They know really good how to ask questions, what they have to do to get all those informations out of them. Of course, don't ignore your business rules. Don't ignore the fact that you have legal laws and business rules. If, for example, 80% of the respondents would have said that they want gorillas on Geopunt, I wouldn't follow that. It's not in my business rules. So you don't keep that also in mind. And last but not least, I would advise you to keep contact with your users. Keep contact, listen to them, always go back to them if you have new ideas, if you're wondering something, and stop and keep listening. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for the presentation, very interesting. I think you've tried to understand better what your current users want and how they would like to use the portal better, or how it can be improved. Have you also thought about how to find people that are maybe not yet using the portal, how to go to other community and enlarge the community of users?
Yes, the last approach, the user testing approach with that specialized company, the first 2 types of users, the first type of user never heard about Geopunt. So that we saw a new kind of category of users that could be interested or not. But we didn't dig deeper on that, no.
Any particular outcomes from that group of users? Are they really different from the other users?
Yes, it was really different because it weren't also people that are geo people. So they found Geopunt very difficult and not laagdrempelig. They found it overwhelming. They couldn't find their way. And those results, we thought it was like obvious, Geopunt, Geoportal, you find your way as a geographer or inspire people. But with those results and the other company, they really told us you have to work on that part to make it less overwhelming and to lead your customer that it's obvious to go and search things on Geopunt. Yes.
As Ine told you, my name is Herman de Groot, and we worked on this presentation, the both of us together. And what we would like to try to show you is who are the users and what do they want, and especially with regard to the Dutch infrastructure. We would like to zoom in on the Dutch National Georegistry. This is the national portal for geodata and services, geoservices. It is the catalog of metadata. So it does not contain the geodata itself and does not service any geoservices. And as such, it is designated as the Dutch Discovery Service for Inspire. This Dutch National Georegistry contains much more metadata than just metadata about Inspire datasets. As you can see, just 2% of the data, the metadata, is metadata of Inspire datasets. So the vast majority is other datasets. The NGR has about 30 million hits per year, but who are these users? And what data are they looking for? And do they search for Inspire data? And where do they want to use this data for? These questions, together with other more functional and quality-related questions, were asked in a user survey, which was ordered by the Dutch Ministry of Interior and executed by the Dutch survey company Statisfact. And it took the form of an online questionnaire, which was executed during the months of July and August, just very recently. And we used banners and links on websites and on portals and mailing lists to get to these users. We have some preliminary results. We just got the results in last week, and I would like to show you some interesting results. Well, the response was only 112 questionnaires. That's much less than the 522 of Informatie Vlaanderen. But nevertheless, we had some interesting results, I hope. One of the first questions we asked was, for which type of organization do you work? And we've got a rather similar results, that about 3/4 of the respondents answered that they work in the public sector, and just a third, 29%, in the private sector. Of those users, what kind of organization do they work for? Well, on the national level, about 8% works for a ministry, 15% for provinces, and 10% for water boards, so that's more the regional level. But perhaps the most interesting thing here is that 37% answered that they work for local government, for municipalities. So it's used at a local level as well. For those respondents who answered that they work in the private sector, we asked rather the same question. And they answered that about 30% works for consultancy firms and about 40% in ICT or geo-ICT. And that brings up another question which is raised very often. Is this just a portal for geospecialists? And for that reason, we asked the question, do you use GIS software? And not surprising, about 80% answered yes, they use GIS software every day. And just 6% answered that they don't use GIS software at all. And when you take a closer look at where they are using this data for, you've got the usual suspects. Spatial analysis and visualization is answered very frequently, and software development just rarely, to be honest. If you take a closer look at the policy themes for which obtained datasets are used, you can see that space and infrastructure is mentioned very often, 80 times. Nature and environment is also mentioned very often. And I'm very happy to see that, personally, that cultural heritage is also mentioned rather frequently. Now let's take a closer look at the Inspire data. How often do you search for Inspire data, we asked. Well, 40% answered, I don't know what Inspire is. And 29% answered, I'm not searching for Inspire data. I know what it is, but I'm not searching for it. So that's the bad news, I guess. But perhaps the good news in this chart is that 10% answered that they search for Inspire data multiple times a week, which is surprisingly, I guess. If you put the answer to the question, how often do you search for data in general, next to the answers of the question, how often do you search for Inspire data, you get this result. And here you see that searching for data is done much more frequent than just searching for Inspire data. 32% answered that they look for data a number of times a week, which is a rather high percentage, I guess. Then let's take a look at the other end of the graph. I don't know what Inspire data is. 14% answered that they don't know what Inspire data is. Who are those users? Well, if you combine that answer to the question, in what kind of organization do you work, you get this graph. And here you see is that, luckily enough, Inspire is well known in the public sector. It's also rather known in the private sector, which is surprisingly, I guess. And yeah, to be honest, we have to do some work for the private users, students and scholars. There's some communication to do there. Now let's go to the conclusions and our next steps. I said this is just a first impression of the raw data we got in last week, and some further analysis needs to be done. We take our time for that, and those analyses are carried out right now as we speak by StatusFact. And when we get that analysis, we would like to present the results to our stakeholders. We've got a NGR stakeholders group in the Netherlands who come together frequently and discuss all kinds of things, functionality and new versions of the NGR. We want to present the results to that group, and those results will be more than just where they use the data for. It will also be about what's their opinion, what's the user's opinion about functionality, about types of services they use, what do they miss, how do they search, what is their opinion about filtering. Those kinds of questions were also asked. And with their opinion, with that information we get from the stakeholders, we would like to formulate improvements on the NGR. And when we agree on that, and of course when we find the means, we get the finance for those improvements, we hope we will have the opportunity to implement some or all of the improvements in the next version.
Yeah, just, I mean, from an Inspire perspective, of course, this becomes more interesting if you can raise the bar of the Inspire labeled datasets from 2% to something somewhat higher. Huh? Why do you not have more Inspire labeled datasets? And is it not, I mean, for a national SDI, which is meant to be supported by Inspire, I mean, we should have more Inspire datasets. And I'm not thinking about maybe if you take it very strict and say the fully compliant data set, we only call them Inspire data sets, then of course I can understand the 2%. But if you let's say take the metadata as a criteria or to some intention to bring this into some harmonization as a criteria, then you could raise this bar. At least I think it would help promote the Inspire story.
Yes. Well, perhaps the answer to that question is that the percentage is low, but perhaps it has something to do with the high number of data sets, metadata data sets in the NGR. And that data set is about all kinds of things and on all kinds of spatial levels, so from very local to national. And so that's perhaps part of your answer. And another part of the answer would perhaps be that the data is how do you say that? Yeah, but we tried. We had the obligation, perhaps, to implement Inspire in a lean and mean fashion. And that was the obligation we got from our parliament. And for that reason, we combined data sets to merely one data set, and we did not put the obligation on all the different data providers which are supplying that data to supply that data in an Inspire form as well. So there are more Inspire datasets, but they are generalized, aggregated to just one dataset with just one metadata record, which is just one hit. Perhaps that's nice as well.
Hello, I'm Hugo Hoordegroof from DG Environment. Now, I'm a huge fan of the PDoc, and I'm a huge fan of the plugins for QGIS. I use them, and I wish I would find more of these plugins all across Europe. Now, one of the things I have learned by looking at the entire PDoc catalog, I use it a lot of times to demonstrate it also to my colleagues, to my management, what Inspire can become if it's organized in the way of doing it, is that actually I find that almost 100% of these data fall under the Inspire data teams. So it's the labeling also of what is an Inspire dataset and what is not an Inspire dataset that could create a confusion. And frankly, I couldn't care less, because all the data that I see is going to be relevant for one application or another.
Well, that's quite a compliment for PDOK, and thank you for that. I'm just a user of it, so I can very welcome that the compliment. Yes, you're quite right. And if you would just take a look at the data itself, it's more or less Inspire data. But the data provider is not designated as a data provider for Inspire. And a lot of those data providers are very lucky that they are not data providers. So that data is mostly aggregated, as I said, to a higher level, and yes, a central central portal is assigned to be the portal for the Inspire data, and so the specific data providers who have small data sets don't have that obligation.
Maybe just a follow-up question on these discussions. Michael Lutz, JRC. Maybe more interesting than the discussion is it Inspire, is it not Inspire data, and putting the label or not putting the label, is really what you said earlier. What is the level of detail? Is it local data set? Is it national data sets? And maybe also the question of are you having any users that are coming from outside the Netherlands that would like to have access to your data across border, from Germany, from Belgium? Do you have any insights into that from your analyses?
Well, to be honest, I don't think so, do we?
No, we have not yet. Not yet. No. It was also very recent.
Edwin Biegel, Rijkswaterstaat in the Netherlands. I saw that the survey was done in the holiday period. So I think the results are biased by that fact. Yeah. And, I would suggest you do another, stop the further analysis with this one. And do another analysis for a month and then go further, because I would like the whole the whole population.
Yes. Yeah.
Instead of only the few ones who are not going to holiday and are working.
The workaholics. Yes.
And yes.
Yeah. Yeah, thank you very much for that advice. You're quite right. And in that sense, we look at this survey as just zero. Yes, just the first one in a couple of surveys we would like to perform. And to be honest, we thought about doing this survey somewhere in the beginning of this year, and we tried to get some results before this conference. And that's why we are pressed to do it in the month of July and August.
Hello again, round two. I'm still Laura, still product owner of Geopunt. Now I would like to tell you something about my experience of Google Analytics for our Geoportal. I must say I'm not a specialist of Google Analytics. It wasn't me who made the choice in the beginning, at the start of Geopunt, to use Google Analytics, just because I wasn't a product owner at that time. And I also want to say that there are other solutions for web analytic tools, like Karen for GRC told me that there are also an open source, matomo.org. So it's not that I'm paid by Google, just because that we use Google Analytics, and I just wanted to share it with you for what I'm using it as a product owner for my powerful business tool. I'm still working for Informatie Vlaanderen. I'll skip that slide. This one also I already explained, but I would like you again to look at our nice number of 6,000 users per day active, an average, and that number I extracted from Google Analytics. Google Analytics, what is it? If I had to explain it in a few words, this would be it. It is a very powerful web analytics tool that tracks the activity of your website and that helps you identify who your visitor is. Who is he? Where does he come from? Which browser does he use? It is free and it's rather simple to use. You just sign up, get a tracking code, put it on every pages of your HTML website, and you start for the basic functionalities. If you need some extra functionalities, extra statistics, you'll have to make an effort to customize it. And I think Google Analytics is reliable because it's also worldwide used. It's the most popular web analytic tool in the world. It gives you the answer to following big questions. How many people visit my website? Where do they live? Which pages do they visit most? Which tools are the most popular? Which website sends traffic to my website? And do I need a mobile-friendly website? As we saw in my presentation before, there also you can see in Google Analytics, are there already users that come to my website on a mobile device? And why is it? Is it that it's so low because it's not mobile-friendly, or is it because they're not interested? And that's why I asked the question in my online survey and in the questionnaire, as I mentioned before. So Google Analytics gives you answers, but sometimes not deep enough, not detailed enough, so it's always useful to do extra questionnaires or surveys. Let's take a look at Google Analytics. I brought some screenshots with me. This is the homepage of Google Analytics, where you can see real-time reports. You can see on the left that you have lots of reports in several groups: real-time, audience, acquisition, behavior, etc. There are more than 50 basic reports in Google Analytics you can see and monitoring. This is an example of the real-time report. It was one of those evenings this week, so it wasn't really much of users at that moment, 21. You can see every real-time, as a word it says, real-time statistics about where do they come from, which pages are they looking at that moment, which kind of technology do they use? Is it on a desktop, mobile, tablet? You can see that also here in the screenshots. But one of the reports I often use is the audience report. This is the overview of the audience report, and I will take you on a tour through it just to mark you some functionalities that are useful. First I want to tell you about is that you can change every time, once you get a Google account, to your other websites that are tracking, that you use Google Analytics to track. For example, in Geopunt we have several apps, an app for economy, an app for Inspire, an app for other kind of grouped teams. But on those several apps, we made a different website to track on Google Analytics. We can compare them and we can see, evaluate, is it often used? And why is it that it's maybe not so often used? The report you see in Google Analytics, you can easily export in CSV, PDF, Excel, as I use mostly Excel. You can change your period, time frame, start date, end date. It's really also useful. And also the temporal granularity, for example, per day, per hour, per month. The line graph you can see will change then. If you hover the line graph, you will get the information for this example about the users, amount of users where you hover. Beneath the line graph, you always get a set of metrics. If you don't understand them, you hover them and you get lots of information. You can switch reports and always get the top 10. If you want to see more of them, you can go to the full report of that kind, of that type. You saw the just before, that was the audience overview report from the launch of Geopunt in November 2013 till this week. And I exported it, I do it every month, to report to myself, but also for management, to see the evolution and the growth, or the, not growth, the increase of the users and the page views. That can be useful for reporting, as I said, to management, but also to evaluate why was there a peak, why wasn't, what was it a dull, not a peak, the opposite of the peak. And it can be very useful. For example, these peaks you can see are the results every time when Geopunt came into an online media article. We had a lot of peaks, and at that moment, the real-time report is useful to see how many users do you have, and you immediately can go to your developers to ask to upscale if necessary. Another question, another useful report, because there are more than 50 and I had to choose some, is the fact which technology your user uses. I have an example that I brought with me about another website, not Geopunt, my other website. My developer said to me that he wouldn't support Internet Explorer anymore. And I said, I believe there are still users that uses that. But I just had a thought, so I couldn't prove it. So I went to Google Analytics, and I saw, indeed, that there was still 24% of my users that uses Internet Explorer. And I even can go deeper in it. For example, here, you can see it's the example of Geopunt. From 1 year, you can change example that you can change every time also your kind of view. I click on the Internet Explorer browser, and I also can see which version they uses. Of course, my developer immediately understood that he had still to support Internet Explorer, and I agreed that we had a transition period where I would communicate with my visitors to change to another browser. That is really powerful. As a product owner, I'm not that technical, and those numbers for Google Analytics help me argument, evaluate, and talk to my technical people when they say, no Internet Explorer anymore. This is really handy for me. This is an example of an acquisition overview, where you can see, as I told also in my first presentation, you can see if your user came to Geopunt directly, typing in the URL, or that they came through a referral, another website that mentions Geopunt, or that they find Geopunt typing a keyword. And if you click on the organic search in this matter, you can see which keywords they used to come to your website. I told about it before, that it's easy to install, to sign up, to use the tracking code, but it takes extra effort to know even more about your website. This is the view of Geopunt map, and we created on each tool of it, and each kind of functionality that people can click on. We created events in Google Analytics. That costs extra effort to make, but it's really useful, and that's one of the reports we often uses. For example, on the right you can see the layer tree, where people go to a certain theme and click on, toggle on a certain layer. You can see the report in Google Analytics here, where every functionality is shown. It is in the behavior report. If I then click further on theme, I can see if how many people selected a layer and how many selected a POI type. And if I click on the layer selection, I can see which kind of layers that they toggled on. Google Analytics for Geopunt, very briefly, because my time is almost finished. 5 years now, we have a lot of data. We can evaluate, we can see the progression, we can see the evolution, which was popular in the beginning, which is popular now. I find it really powerful business tool as a product owner for my evaluation to see the progress, etc., from the users, the behavior, there's the events I was talking about, which kind of tools do they often use. That can be also very useful if you don't have budget enough and you have to bug prioritize. Will you solve a bug that is used 80%, or will you solve a bug that is on a tool that is only used 1%? I think that decision will be rather quickly made. The fact that it's real time, we use that a lot for upscaling, as I said. The time period you can choose, that we have set up Google Analytics per app. The fact that you see the technology, I think my example proved that it is powerful. And Google Analytics, you can change and add accounts as many as you want. My conclusions. The startup cost of Google Analytics is very low, as I mentioned, but to customize, you'll need extra effort. And I believe it's a very powerful tool for business. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there questions?
Yes, I wonder. The half of the part of Belgium is speak Dutch, other half speak French, and I saw that only 1% French are visiting your website. So aren't they interested in data of their own country?
Well, Geopunt is a portal of the Flemish region, yes. And it only covers, it has data from Flanders.
I know.
And the language is indeed in Dutch, the whole site. So I guess that may be also not so good for French people, French-talking people, to visit the site.
Yes, but the English...
the English?
The English visitors...
Yes, sorry, I thought you asked
there were much more English visitors, so they are more interested in the Flemish data than the French. So I was just wondering...
Well, I must say, my title of my presentations were the pros and the cons. I maybe only stepped on, or how to say, the pros, but the cons of Google Analytics, of course, people can... they can go incognito, or they can change settings on their browser that Google Analytics then tracks in mistake, and then I guess this is also the reason that sometimes these statistics are not that accurate. It's not the Bible, Google Analytics. It's just, I think, useful to get like the example of the browser. You get an ID, because everything is open on my portal, the data is open, but how many does it really, people click on the download button, how many people really do that? And then it's useful to know.
Yes, we're there, thank you. And what a great session, I think. I'm so interested in how we explore more the user side of Inspire, so I found the other presentations really useful. Mine is a little bit different, so I guess the position that we're looking at here is less about monitoring after the services have been developed and more about how you might start with that at the beginning. So just to introduce myself, Abigail, I'm Product Development Manager at Eurogeographics. We are the membership association for mapping and cadastral agencies. Can you hear me okay from here? Yeah, I can. I'm a little bit hidden, but that's other issues there. And we're funded under the Connecting Europe facility at the moment on a 2-year project called Open European Location Services. We spoke about the project quite a lot at the Inspire conference last year, so I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about the project. You can find that online. But yeah, just a note of thanks for the partners and the funding received from the European Union for this project. Our vision is to develop pan-European harmonized data services, and that builds on work that you might have seen at previous work on the European Location Framework project, and now through our Open ELS funded project. So I was brought into your geographics about 3 years ago, particularly on the product development side, and to try and bring a little bit more of a user-customer focus to what we were developing. This is one of the early slides I put together that actually it doesn't really matter how much time you might spend on content or design if it's not going to be used. So very important that what we're developing is connected to user need, and that we're using those users or customers to influence what we're doing. So we've taken an approach in the OpenELS project looking at the concept of user-centered design. So this is not a new concept by any means. It's something that's often used a lot in commercial software and application development. I've got limited time today, so I'm not going to go into all of the concepts, but you can certainly find a lot of reading about that online. But really, it's about involving the user through all of the processes of the design and development process, from initial understanding and defining audience at the beginning, through to the development of your concepts, and then, of course, some of the end user testing, some of the examples that we saw in the earlier presentations. So the objectives of taking this approach in the project were, we already have quite a lot of information gathered in past work about user interests in what we're trying to do, but it was quite at a high level. And I wanted to dig a little bit deeper on that through a discovery phase early in the project. We really have limited resources in what we do, I'm sure in what you all do in your organizations too. So let's focus on the priority areas and the problems so that we can bring those solutions. And not just talk about our ideas of what we want to develop, but understand what are the fundamental access needs and content that users might have. And we really want to, as I said, include this as a kind of iterative process during the project. So what we've actually done so far, we have conducted some really in-depth interviews, which I'll talk about on the next slide. Started to use those in a number of ways across the project, but particularly looking at how we analyze those in quite a consistent way and manner to prioritize the work that we do, make sure that we're validating back our analysis, so we're just not making our own assumptions, but testing that back, and then making some proposals about what we're developing, and again, receiving feedback on those. We're very lucky that we have very good relationships with commission users, and I know some of them are in this room, and I recognize they gave up their time for some of this work on the interview stage. Through our relationship with Eurostat, we already deliver some pan-European products. So we were lucky to be able to get some users together over a couple of sessions to perform some really in-depth interviews where we started off not with promoting what we had or going in there to ask people what they thought of what we were doing, but really to understand what are the problems that some of those users had. So particularly, we started off looking at commission users, policy users, people supporting evidence-based policy making. Trying to find out what they do at the moment, what are some of the obstacles, what tools they might use, and something that was interesting as well, they're the closest to what they do. How do they think that might change going ahead? So are there new policy initiatives? Are there internal changes? Are there resourcing issues? What might they see being some of the challenges? And also, so we're not just looking at today's position, but projecting a little bit further ahead. So we had, I think, about 9 hours of really in-depth interviews. I feel like we can do more, but it was a really good starting point. What we did was take those outputs, which you can imagine, they were structured around questions, but there's quite a lot of narrative and quite a lot of stories coming back from the user, and broke that down into a process that was a little bit more analytical. So we coded all of those responses and put them into a user story framework. You might be familiar with user stories, but basically they describe as a analyst, as a policymaker, so who is the user, I want, what is it that you want to do, so that why are you trying to do this thing, that's quite important, and what would success look like in that task. So we broke into, I think we have over 70 of those user stories that we developed from those first interviews. And we also coded some of those stories, for example, against Inspire themes or against kind of key tasks, so we could see what are the issues that were coming out most frequently, where were the bigger problem areas. I should also say that as well as taking the interviews, we had also some more detailed requirements through this process that came through from other reports that had been done. For example, the Copernicus services have done a lot of work on user requirements, and other materials that are provided to us. We also tried to code those in a similar way. We went through a consolidation process to bring together some of the key themes in a very high-level way. That's a great thing to be able to present back to development teams, our board, other users who, you know, to say, have we understood this correctly? So this also formed part of our validation process. We think you're trying to do this because of this reason, and we think you might find this helpful. Is that right? How right have we got that? So making sure that we're validating that process. So we've used that now to develop some internal product proposals for the project. We've based those on user need. That was the brief of the project, that should be our most important factor. But of course, we all know that we operate in constraints. So data availability, or people asking for things that we can never deliver, you know, that's very difficult to write a proposal for. Do we have the resources in the project right now to meet some of these requirements? And is this the most important thing to do with the resource that we've got? So a few different factors on how we prioritize that. We then had 6 proposals that we could take forward and present to the board, which is fantastic. So I am aware that there's not a huge amount of time in this session and I've got so much to say, but I just wanted to talk a little bit more about some of the other user testing techniques that we've considered that we might use during the project or in future, but some of them were covered by other speakers this morning. The in-depth interviews are fantastic. We have some other things in process. So our first work was with commission users. We are in process of undertaking a survey with SME users, and particularly to identify people that we might go and have more in-depth interviews with. That work is now starting, so getting a different flavour of some of the requirements. We think that we would like to bring some people together around specific themes or specific user needs to play back some of our proposals on our first work. Something that I'm really interested in, and come and speak to me after, is you know, obviously in a commercial environment, there's a lot of great examples of usability testing, tracking what users are doing, A/B test. You give them one version and another and work out what works better. Those are very difficult to do in the environment that we're working in, but I'm interested to know from the Inspire context what other things people are doing. So that's why I've just quickly flagged that here. But I will conclude because I am getting the signal to wrap up. So from the work that we did then, it's really brought a greater focus into what we're delivering. We already had some work in progress from past projects. It's provided us with a level of validation for that was really helpful. It's also knocked out maybe a few things we're working on that we've decided are less of a priority. The big one for me is that probably the last 2 points on the results is, I think as Laura was mentioning about using Google Analytics as an evidence base, having an evidence base to direct your resources, particularly when you're working in a collaborative environment with lots of different people's views and thoughts, has been really helpful to pin that down. And of course, building that relationship with the users, we do want to have an iterative approach and carry this on through the other stages of the project. So that's definitely been a success. Challenges, and I think some of these were brought up in the questions of some of the other presentations. How do you know the people that you really want to talk to? Sometimes it's quite difficult to also get their availability. I guess when you look at some of the big platform providers, your bank, Facebook, you know, they have an active customer base. It's quite easy for them to launch surveys quite quickly. It's quite challenging for us to get the level of depth we need, particularly in a remote environment. We're covering all of Europe. And yes, we are always constrained by what's actually possible to deliver. So it's also about managing some of the expectations of that feedback that we get back. But I'm going to close there and try and keep us to time. And my details are there. I'm around certainly for the next couple of hours. So if anyone's got any questions after this, we can cover. Yeah.